today, since we are here, and as other people start joining us, we'll just bring them on. So it's nice to meet you virtually, Jill. Thanks for taking some time to join me this afternoon. So today we're going to be talking about Leadership Development 2.0 and specifically how to address the leadership gap, because there is one that's happening in organizations. And so what I wanted to do is share a little bit about the work that we've been doing here and what I've been finding and observing with our clients. And you know, for those that are on the call now and that are joining the call, feel free to pipe in, and there's a chat feature in the right-hand corner there that you can pop in any questions or any comments along the way. In terms of just a little bit of background on the exam table, I'm not sure how familiar you are with what we do, but we essentially have 3 areas of focus. The first is peer coaching for high potential specifically at all levels in the organization, and we do those programs both in an open enrollment, so public format, as well as on-site. Then we have a program called the HR Group Coach Catalyst program, which is enabling HR leaders to bring group and peer coaching into their work within organizations, so specifically for the HR leaders. And then we have a Leader-to-Leader Accelerator program, which is similar to the HR Catalyst program, but it's aimed at line leaders to help them bring in a group coaching system, peer coaching system into the work that they do, and it's kind of a dual leadership development program. So that's what we do, and here's just some of the clients that we've worked with over the years, specifically in this area of leadership acceleration and development. So today, what we're going to take a look at are kind of 4 areas. So the first part is, you know, what's really happening in organizations today, because there's a lot of factors that are really driving how leaders are needing to learn and to lead, and why traditional leadership programs are falling short. You know, what's happening, we're a lot of money in them, but there's a big gap between the money being invested and the return that organizations feel that they're seeing. And so then I want to share a new way to think about leadership development beyond training, coaching, just really looking at how we develop leaders potentially in a little bit of a different way. And then a bit of a chance for you to think about your readiness to implement an approach like the one I'm going to share with you. So that's where we're going to go today in the presentation. So as I said, specific questions that you have, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll go along, and feel free to kind of add any comments that you may have around some of the observations that I'm going to share, because I'm sure you're seeing things at your level as well that probably, you know, maybe some other around this too. So in terms of today's workplace realities, I think there's a number of things that are going on that are really driving how we need to think about learning differently and leadership development differently. So if I look at one of the first things that's happening, we have more people involved in our work. Very, you know, few people now have the luxury of sort of working in their little box on their little job or task. There's a lot of interactivity with you know, different people across the organization. So the implications from this, from a learning perspective, but also from a, you know, how I get the job done perspective, is we need more input from others to be able to do our work. We need to understand more broadly the business processes. You know, one of the big moves that we're seeing in organizations is this need to break down silos and to have people understand and work across processes. And then finally, more and more we see people in multiple matrix reporting relationships. And sometimes it's with peers, sometimes it's at a different level. So with more people involved in your work, a number of implications that we need to think about as we think about both leadership development and also learning design. The other thing that's happening in organizations today is that there's more complex data and information being thrown at people. I think we're all in this cult of busy right now, and part of the reason why we're feeling that way is because of the amount of data that we're receiving on a regular basis. And again, implication for this in terms of as we think about learning and leadership is we need to be able to analyze very quickly what's important data and what's not important data so that we can make decisions, effective decisions. The next thing, I have friends of mine I always tease who are change management consultants, and I always think, is that really still a field anymore? Because really isn't change the new normal? We're under continuous, relentless change. And, a few implications around that. All of this change and complexity has created, a lot of uncertainty in organizations where we're not sure what the right solution is, and we don't have the answers for it. And therefore, we really need to be able to innovate and collaborate with others to come up with new solutions and to look at things a little bit differently. And again, I think it circles back to sort of the first point around more people involved in the work that we're doing. We have more of a need to be able to work with others and understand the broader context of the business to be able to innovate and look at some of the business situations that we're facing differently. And then finally, I feel like this has just been on the increase for the last certainly 10 years, but it just seems to be picking up steam. And this is this increase in productivity demands. A few of the implications around that, when we have more productivity demands, the only way left now to get to productivity, I think, is through engagement. If we can get people more engaged in the work they're doing, they're going to be more productive. But it also has an implication that there is less time for people to reflect. So when we talk about the need to make, better decisions, know how to wade through the data, we're also in this catch-22 where we don't have a lot of time and a lot of thinking time to do that. I think, the whole notion of time management is becoming a little bit antiquated. It's not that we don't know how to manage our time. It's really actually blocking out the time to do the deep thinking and the strategic thinking that's required to be effective. And the other piece to this is that learning needs to really fit into our work. Taking us out of work to do learning is something that is becoming increasingly difficult, I think, for organizations and for individuals to be able to manage. So with all of these demands and what it's requiring, what it's doing to us as leaders, and then as we look at it in terms of a learning design perspective, from a leadership perspective, this is demanding that leaders have more collaboration. As a leader today, you need to be able to collaborate with others in order to get your work done. There's an increased need for leaders to have strategic thinking and reflection time, so the ability to think strategically, but also the ability to reflect and integrate learning. The other piece that's very crucial is stronger relationships. To get to engagement and to build engagement within teams, but also, frankly, for yourself within, connecting to the work that you're doing in the organization. There's all of these pieces that relate to trust, that relate to the types of relationships you have with other people. I think there's a real need for empathy within organizations so that we can understand the pressures that other departments and teams are under. So as leaders, more and more, and especially that mid-career bucket, which is where we spend the majority of our time, is with leaders in the middle, kind of that senior manager to VP level. It's just this very, very heavy emphasis on soft skills, and on soft skills really being at the premium. It becomes the differentiator that we see time and time again between those leaders that are able to continue up the ladder or continue to be able to increase scope, and those that are less successful. And I think that's why we've seen such a big burst in coaching over the last number of years, is because we're trying to get to kind of more of that behavioral type development. And yet when Workopolis surveyed senior executives, the number one characteristic that they say was missing was soft skills. 67% of senior executives said that. So obviously, there's a gap between how we're preparing people and their readiness. And it's even more so, there's a couple of really interesting pieces of research that came out recently, one from the Deloitte Human Capital Trends for 2015 and the Corporate Research Forum. And what they found was that 51% of organizations identified leadership development as being an urgent need in their organization. And we know, I mean, I know you're all seasoned HR folks on this call today, is that we've had this pressure for at least a decade now, if not more, with the impending baby boom retirement. So this need has just increased, and out of the organization survey, 51% felt that they were going to increase their spending in leadership development. And yet the gap that is happening, and maybe you're feeling it in the work that you're doing, is that only 6% of companies felt that their leadership talent was very ready. So we're spending, we see that there's an urgent need, we're spending lots of money on it, and yet only 6% feel that they've got the bench that they need to be ready for the next wave of retirements, or the next succession candidates ready to go. So why is that happening? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that kind of keep me up at night. Why is it that we can be spending all of this money and there's no shortage of leadership, development programs and things that are available out there? So what's happening, and why are they falling short? So if I think about, the evolution of development and how we've gone about developing leaders, and if you go way back, pre-industrial revolution, we had apprenticeships. And it's really that idea of working alongside a master and learning by doing, getting instant feedback as you worked on your craft. And that was really before Henry Ford and the Industrial Revolution came along. A lot of the work that was being done was in this sort of apprenticeship format. We were much more entrepreneurial as individuals prior to that. When you look at today, what are we doing? We're kind of going back to that model. You see more of an increase in coaching, mentoring, looking for those sorts of individual support structures for people. And they're all good, but I think when we look at them, the idea of this traditional one-to-one approach, there's limitations. What we typically do is we have this relationship between the manager and the individual, or the individual and the mentor, or the individual coach. The challenge with that is when you look at it in the manager bubble, most individuals actually spend very little time with their managers. They spend a lot more time with their peers and their direct reports. So managers don't necessarily have the same sightline, nor do they have the expertise. And especially as you get more senior you get, the less technical competence you have. So very difficult to start, kind of providing the feedback. That old mentorship of approach doesn't hold anymore in the knowledge economy. And then on top of that, and I really see this as an executive coach where I'm being asked to coach an individual in an organization. There is a really big challenge that you have in one-to-one relationships. You do not see the leader in context. You hear the side of their story and their version of events, and certainly you can get at a view of that individual through 360s. But this one-to-one relationship limits the opportunity to really see the leader more broadly in terms of how they're interacting with the people around them. It doesn't necessarily give you sightline to the behaviors, especially when we start getting into some of the behavioral work that leaders need to do. Really very limited in terms of what we can do that. And I think when I think of organizations as well, another limit for these types of approaches is that also as individual managers, mentors, or internal coach, you're only seeing one person. So in terms of breadth of talent across the organization, you're not seeing as much as you could, especially as you think about succession candidates and things like that, where you'd like to get a lot of visibility of those people to senior ranks. You're not getting as much of that as you could in these one-to-one type structures. So, but that's traditionally, when I think of high potential development, leadership development, it's often, let's get them a coach, or let's put them into a mentoring program, or we get their manager to do particular activities with them. The other thing we do, and has been our long time go-to, is classroom training. And where did this evolve from? Well, this was Industrial Revolution stuff, and this was the, the one-room schoolhouse with the teacher at the front of the room teaching by rote. And when you think about what we do today, it's really not that much different. We have an expert at the front of the room who is teaching people, in a classroom. So we're taking people out of their work environment, separating them from their work environment, and teaching. And I don't know if this stat is true. I question it. But when they say 10%, we retain 10% of what we learn in the classroom, that seems to me like a very low return on investment and effort. Of course, knowledge is important, and the ability to acquire knowledge, and sometimes the classroom is the way to go. It's not that any of these things are wrong, but when we use them on their own, they don't always do the full job. So what I see happening, and maybe your organizations are doing some of this work, is 70-20-10. So a lot of the new, well, it's not even new really, this comes out of the 60s, this model 70-20-10, but a lot of organizations now have been looking at how to build their development around these buckets. So 10% being through formal training, so there's our classroom or book piece, 20% through coaching or mentorship or feedback, that type of piece, and then 70% through on-the-job application. I think, again, great concepts, but what I see us doing in companies, I work with a client right now that they do this, and they break down the development in these little siloed buckets, is that's what we're doing. We're siloing the development once again. So here's another model to think about. This is from the Corporate Leadership Council, and it's a bit of a spin on 70-20-10, but I think it's an important one. They surveyed 8,000 leaders, and they asked these leaders, what has had the biggest factor, what's had the biggest impact on your leadership success? And the research, this is out of a scale of 1 to 10, found that, not surprisingly, classroom training had the lowest impact. On-the-job experience, though, was in the middle. The thing that had the most impact on leadership success were these elements, and they called them relationship programs. They were things like having a leadership plan, interacting with a community of peers, strategizing with a coach, working with a mentor, and getting feedback. And when you bring those pieces together and think about it in the context of the on-the-job experience in the classroom learning, you can sit in a classroom and learn things. You can actually be on the job and have experiences, but unless you synthesize and integrate those experiences, which is really what this final relationship programs bucket is talking about, you can repeat the same experience over and over and over again and learn nothing from it. So I think the idea of bringing together that 70-20-10, where we are pulling all of the elements together, is the opportunity that we have as we think about leadership and learning design and what we can do to actually strengthen the leadership pipeline in a different way. The other thing that's really happening in workplaces today is the arrival of our friends, the millennials. And this is a cohort of young leaders who have a very different value set than the baby boomer population, but also have been brought up learning in a very different method. They learn more from a pull strategy than a push strategy. So they were brought up with the internet. They can go and find whatever they want whenever they want it, and are much more socially based. The other thing about the millennials is that they're less driven towards that C-suite type role. They're less willing to sacrifice from a personal standpoint, personal life-wise, their lives to further their career. So unless organizations change radically, which some are trying to do that, it does have an implication for many more traditional structures where we're going to be fishing from a smaller pool of millennial candidates for some of the kind of key roles. And, they are, I suppose, not fickle, but they are more apt to move on more quickly if things are not meeting and addressing their needs. They also have a strong, very strong preference and bias to learn in social learning situations, so where they can connect and learn with other people, as opposed to sort of working on their own. It's been how they, frankly, how they have been learning all the way through university, and so when they come into the workplace, that's what they're also looking to continue to be able to do, this sort of relationship-based approach to learning. So when we think about where we put our focus as leadership development professionals, and when we look at how we develop leaders, one of the things that I've observed is that we spend a lot of time in our programs on what I would call the above-the-line activities, so the knowledge, the skills, and the behavior. And I think this is really at the crux of why we don't see a lot of development work, or leadership development stick, is because it's really the things that are below the surface that really drive the outcomes that we need to see above the surface. So most programs and most leadership, courses that people start off with are very, give people the skills and knowledge they need, how to delegate, how to coach people, and all of those kinds of things. We start trying to tap into behavior, but often it's very, I find we'll kind of shy away from it because it's difficult, and how do you measure it, and that's why I believe really strongly that coaching has really come to the forefront, because it seems like, okay, well, we'll just get you a coach, and the coach is going to work on your behavior. I mean, that's a very expensive way to develop leaders in this sort of one-to-one coach type approach. And we really don't get into some of the attitude, mindset, beliefs, values, motivations, and yet those are the things that underpin. If I'm not interested in changing my behavior, I'm just not going to change it. And so that's why we can invest all kinds of money in sending people on training and development, or frankly, investing in getting them coaching. But if there's a big disconnect between what they're motivated to do and what they value out of work and the behaviors that are required for them, you can invest all kinds of time and energy and money and not see the result that you need to see. So I think as we think about, where can we go to really start to close this gap and take development to a place where we're actually getting some results, and we're actually getting below the surface of what we need to do. I'm going to share with you sort of a new way to think about how to structure development, and I think to think about how we can take development away from being the responsibility of learning and development and really push it more into the hands of leaders. I myself grew up through the line. That is my background. I came at leadership first being a line leader and then coming into the leadership and development space. And I would say that there's a little bit of bottlenecking that I think happens within our organizations around what we feel leaders are ready for and what we feel leaders can handle. And I think we need to shift a bit of that mindset and look to empower leaders to do more of this kind of work themselves. So when I see typical kind of development programs, we often have all these elements, but we treat them as very discrete. So people will do an assessment, an action plan, and then they'll be sent off to maybe some courses. And maybe there's a link, but there's not always a really direct link. Or maybe they're then sent off to do some mentoring, and we'll also get some, on-the-job training on the go. But we tend to treat things quite discreetly, and not always finding ways to connect all of these components and concepts together. And my provocation is, what if we could actually provide a solution where we were combining all of these elements? We had coaching, we had mentoring, we had peer feedback, we had informal learning, there was some training elements, there was some action planning and action learning, there was assessment. What if there was a way that we could start to bring together all these pieces? And in fact, for the last close to 8 years, that's what we've been doing. We've been working with a specific model, which I'm going to share with you, which pulls together all of these elements, all of those powerful elements for developing leaders, having a plan, working with a coach, working with a mentor, on-the-job experience and training, and pulling them into a very simple but very tight model that allows leaders to develop and sustain learning over a time period versus it kind of being a all-in-one shot. So I'm going to share with you what we've done, and would welcome any kind of questions as we kind of go along the way. But this is something really that any organization can look to implement in terms of thinking about how you can structure your development programs to actually deliver results and actually get some change going. So this is a model, this is our Roundtable System. This is a program that we deliver both. This particular one is one that we do publicly here in Toronto, and we have a session that's scheduled to start this fall. The elements of the program are fairly simple. So there's 4 core elements that I'll just share with you. At the center of the wheel, you'll see personal goal setting. So this is where the individual can get a sense of their approach. So it starts with a 360 assessment, which is behavioral, which looks at their behavioral approach to leadership. They then set goals, which are around their development priorities for that year, so connected to what the needs of the business are and what their goals are as an individual. And then they participate in 8 peer sessions. These peer sessions are designed to be 3 hours in length and every 6 weeks. So the idea being it's shorter bursts of learning, but done on a frequent pattern so that you get the benefit, as you do when you work with a coach, of working on something and then going into the workplace and applying the learning and seeing what happens and then coming back into the group, debriefing what worked, learning some more tools and techniques, going out and doing those again. So that's kind of how that cycle works of the 8 sessions. The first session and the 8th session you can see are in a different color because they're a little bit different. They're about getting the group up and running and gelled, and the final session is about closing off the group, so it's an intact experience. So the goal setting starts the program individually, so people come in with a very clear plan of what they want to get out of the program. The 8 peer sessions help them work that plan, help them further, move their needle across their developmental journey. And then wrapped around the outside, you see the executive coaching. And that executive coaching piece allows individuals to get some one-on-one coaching outside of the peer experience. And then you can see in the gray band around there, forums, events, supplementary material. We have a membership with our community where you can get access to additional coaching resources, videos, book reviews, all webinars, all kinds of things that help enhance the learning experience. So holistic. The program, the actual peer sessions are delivered by an experienced facilitator mentor, so somebody who's got coaching skills, who's been in line leadership roles and understands what it's like to be a line leader, but is at least 2 to 3 levels above the group that they're facilitating, so that they can bring in that mentorship piece. In addition to the coaching strength, the facilitator also delivers the coaching, so they not only get to see the person in a one-to-one coaching relationship, but they also get to see that person in the context of a group. Our recommended group sizes are between 6 and 8 because that allows you to really go deep and for individuals to really get to know and learn from each other. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the peer component of the program in a second, but this is a program that you can do in a public platform, but we also have one. I just want to show you a variation that we do with corporate clients. So in this variation, you can see that there's manager input included here, and this is where managers can be engaged as part of the goal-setting process to align around what goals are required for the participant, make sure that the manager is on the same page as the participant. There's also progress meetings with that manager to make sure that things are going according to plan. In this version of the model, we've taken out the individual coaching. You can put it back in. It's a framework. So the idea being that you can modify this to be more hands-on or a little bit scaled back depending on the amount of investment of time and energy that you want to put into a particular group. But the peer sessions themselves are really where the richness comes to life. And so I'm going to share with you our model on how we do this. There's 4 components to the peer session. The first is the progress update. And so the progress update is where people can come in and they can talk a little bit about what they've done since we've last seen them. They're given a structure, so we get into helping them reflect and think through their learning. Then they move to a learning topic, and so I have listed some of the topics below. So we've got some core topics that we teach. I would say probably 90% of the management groups that go through a program like this will have how to be a great peer coach, which is actually a standard topic. And then set your compass, which is all about understanding your values. And so getting, again, below that surface, helping leaders understand what their values are and what their motivations are. Then we look at fuel your strengths, which is, again, what gives you passion, what do you want to be contributing to the organization, and how can you do more of that? How can you become a strengths-based leader manager? And then the final one is boost your brand, which is really focused on helping individuals really think about how do they want to show up, what do they want their leadership legacy to be, and how are they presenting themselves on a day-to-day basis at work, and does that align with what the company needs and is looking for from a leader in the organization. And then we have a variety of elective topics. These elective topics are chosen from the start of the program when we're doing the goal setting and we're talking to the managers if we're doing an in-house program, but really allow us to then tailor the group development to really fit the needs of that group and the individuals in that program. So there's a lot of flexibility in a model like this where you could have 3 groups going in an organization or 10 groups going or 20 groups going, and all of them could have potentially slightly different electives because of the needs of that particular group. So it allows you to kind of create a common experience, but at the same time, custom tailor that experience to different levels, different needs. We've done groups where it's been, for example, women's groups as part of a diversity program, and we've had very specific topics that are strong learning needs for senior women. And then we've done, new manager ones that have had a different set of topics that way. So there's a lot of flexibility within the framework. So that's the learning clinic or the learning clinic component. And then the next piece is peer coaching. And this is probably the real power component of the program. Individuals can bring in any issue that they're facing and that they would like to get some peer coaching support around. So in one of the early sessions, we teach them a structure for how to coach each other. And every session that they get together, so those sessions 1 to 8 or 2 to 8, they're having an opportunity to actually do that. So not only are they solving issues in real time or helping an individual, not solve issues, but think more broadly potentially about an issue and help them craft an action plan, they're practicing their coaching skills each and every time. They're broadening their understanding of the organization as they hear what's going on in different parts of the business. I will tell you I've witnessed huge increases in empathy when people realize, gee, that's what my department does, and I didn't realize that's how it was affecting your department. It's a very intimate experience, and it really requires people to be vulnerable, which means that the other thing you're doing is you're building these very powerful relationships within this group of peers. And they're relationships that people can sustain and that they do sustain well beyond the program's close. So that's a very key piece, is this peer coaching component. And then finally, at the end of every session, just like you would do with a coach, you make commitments on what you're going to do between now and when the group gets together again. So just to recap, in every peer coaching session, each one of these 3-hour sessions, there's 4 components. A progress update, we want to know how you're doing against your goals. a learning topic that's driven by the needs of the organization, the manager, and the individual themselves. And then peer coaching around an issue, followed up with commitments around what you're going to do to move forward. This is a coaching-based model of learning. It's integrating training. It's bringing in the facilitator who's facilitating it is bringing more examples and more discussion to the dialogue, but so do each of the participants. The participants in the program are as much as the content of the program as the actual facilitator is. And so in between the sessions, they have their coaching, but they also have learning partner assignments. So they're paired up with a learning partner and are given specific activities to do back on the job to drill down into the learning topics that they're focusing on each month. So you're really starting to build that momentum and frankly, continuous learning around leadership that we need to see, I think that we need to see happen. So when we look at that, so that's really the example of our peer coaching and high potential programs and how we do that in a way that's really building sustainability in for organizations. It's allowing organizations to create communities of learning. Graduates of those programs can go on and continue to work together in their peer group, or they can move into the Leader-to-Leader Accelerator program where they actually get trained to deliver group mentoring to more junior people a couple of layers down, or continue in their own peer group delivering content with each other for a second and subsequent year. So there's a way to start to unleash these pods of leadership development communities and learning communities across the organization. For many people that I talk to ask me the question, would my organization be ready for something like this, a solution like this? It is very different than what I think a lot of people are used to. Because it's a peer-based program and the accountability really is on the peers to be accountable for their own learning. There's a number of things that we've done within the system to ensure that they're bought into that, but there is, from an organizational readiness standpoint, a couple of things that you really do need to consider. The first, so if you think about the three chunks, is it, are you ready for a on-site program potentially to have somebody come on site and do a program like this for you? Or are you ready to go to the other end of the spectrum, which is to actually have leaders trained up to be able to deliver this material themselves? The key things to think about in the organization is level of trust and candor that exists within the organization. If it's a very low-level trust, very politically charged organization, I would suggest that it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging. It's not that it's not possible, but to do that, I would absolutely start with a on-site facilitated program where what you would be doing is starting little fires of a new culture. If you can pull together some of your best and brightest and start them on a path where they are, building their leadership skills in this kind of collaborative way, though, where they can build trusting relationships and develop the strong relationships that would then sustain them as they move through the organization. That is, that would be one way to start the process. The other way to start the process would be actually to start with your HR team and train them to be catalysts. So in that program, what we do, or there's other kind of group coaching things out there, but with us, we train HR people how to deliver group coaching, how to think about setting up group coach-based programs that they can start to establish themselves or support. So if you are going to have a facilitated on-site program, the HR designates can support that program and then ultimately deliver that program or support leaders to continue to deliver that program. If you've got, so trust is a big factor. if you don't have a lot of leadership infrastructure, so if you don't have the basics, people don't know how to delegate, they've never, really thought about coaching, there's probably some foundational leadership development work that you should do first before you start digging into the things below the surface. But this type of an approach where you're really bringing in more of a group coaching, sustainable learning structure is actually a fantastic add-on to baseline training. So when people have gone through a certain baseline of training, this can be a year 2 strategy for them, or it can be woven in to support a baseline training strategy where they can be put into peer groups and run a program in between training sessions that allows them to really dig deeper and move the behaviors into the workplace versus just sitting in the classroom talking about it. So leadership infrastructure is an important consideration. And then the final consideration, these are sort of my big 3, would be coaching culture. Do you have a ready coaching culture? Do you have something that in place already where you've trained managers to a certain level on the one-to-one coaching skills? What this does is sort of amplify that to the next level. I think teaching managers how to one-to-one coach is great. I think teaching managers how to group coach is actually even more beneficial because they're under so much time pressure that once they've got kind of the baseline skills of one-to-one coaching, there is so much more that you can do as a manager with your own teams in terms of group coaching and leveraging that skill set to really advance on business issues more quickly within a group setting. So having, if you've got a good solid coaching culture already with that individual platform, this is a great way to kind of elevate that up and get leaders to start really thinking about leadership from a more holistic standpoint, and give them some tools, like some really concrete tools to be able to deliver some learning content to more junior leaders and managers as they go forward. So readiness and organizational readiness is an important consideration as you think about implementing a process like this, because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of it really is time to sort of think differently about it, and there's a really big need, I think, to build these soft skills that you don't just learn in the classroom. You don't learn how to collaborate in a classroom. You don't learn how to build trust in a classroom. You don't learn how to carve out reflective time in a classroom. You might do those elements, but the idea of being part of something where that is an outcome of the learning that you're doing really allows you then to understand how to transfer that in different kinds of situations. So I think when we think about where leadership development is today and the opportunities as learning professionals and HR professionals for where we need to start thinking about taking leadership development, I think of classic leadership development has always been about the individual. It's you as the individual. You go into the program, you get your 360 done, or you learn about yourself, through Myers-Briggs or one of these assessment tools, and it's very focused on kind of your development. It's taking you out of day-to-day work. Most of the time we're being either going out to meet with our coach, or we're going into a classroom to do something, or we're being taken off the job and put on a special project where, that's supposed to be development, but it's still removing us from our work. We've put a lot of emphasis and focus in leadership development on skills and knowledge and theoretical concepts. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. There's not, and it's great foundation. But I think in terms of where we need to take leaders today, it is to at the next level. Let's get below the iceberg on development and really get people sinking their teeth into, yeah, I know what I need to be doing, but why aren't I doing those things? Right? I can have all the structures in the world on how to manage my time, but if my behavior isn't changing, I'm not going to be any better or any more organized. And if I'm not actually motivated to change that behavior, then what? Right? So I think we've got to move beyond the skills, knowledge, and theoretical concepts. We've got to stop treating leadership like an event, like a one-off event. We've really got to think of it more broadly than that. And I think this notion of continuously leveraging external experts is short-sighted. I think as we think about kind of moving forward in leadership development, we want to really kind of move to be more about the collective, looking at how do we develop not just you as a leader, but if we've got, in a group coach approach, what you're actually doing is you're developing that cohort collectively. Really interesting opportunity for organizations that employ approaches like this is once they're done the leadership training, what about taking that team and putting them on a business issue? Because what you've actually got now is a high-performing team because they've spent 10 months together working on, working through leadership development. They've developed very, very close relationships. They have all of the hallmarks and classics of a high-performing team. Why not? Why not then put them to work in the organization on a real-time business issue versus a fictitious project? I think we need, as we talk about, being removed from the day-to-day, we need to integrate into the day-to-day. We need these learning bites where people can get short bursts of learning, but have the opportunity to go and practice them, but then frankly be held accountable to whether or not they did that. And I think that's this beautiful blend of bringing learning and coaching and peer feedback and frankly peer pressure together gives you this incredible opportunity to have people flip the classroom. The peer sessions become where we debrief what we learned, we top up our learning, but then we go out and we do things differently. As we talked about, we need to really think about habits and behaviors and immediate pressing issues with this real pressure for performance and this real drive for productivity. We don't have time to be looking at case studies. We need to be looking at what are the issues that we are needing to tackle here and now. And then I think this idea of creating learning communities, continuous learning communities where leaders are thinking of leadership as an ongoing development opportunity as opposed to a course that they take. There's a real opportunity in organizations to start to shift that mindset around development, and I think creating communities is an amazing way to do that. And then finally, you learn leadership by doing, and I think too often we rely on people to teach our leaders who've never actually led before. I mean, that's kind of the bitter irony of a lot of leadership experts is, those that can't do teach. And I think we're missing a great opportunity in our organizations to leverage the experience and wisdom of people who are doing this kind of work day to day. And when you create a peer-based platform where you can have people share their experience and it's facilitated and they've got a facilitator who's been through a lot of those experiences but is also very skilled at pulling together those conversations, it's incredibly powerful because people are not being given some textbook answer on how do you fire somebody or how do you deal with the emotional side of firing somebody, because really that's more of the issue. They're getting real stories and real examples and real kind of, tales of, caution that they can take and choose to learn to, apply themselves. So we've really got an amazing opportunity, I think, to tap more of the wisdom than we're doing. So I think it's a real time right now in organizations to think differently about leadership development and think about how we design learning to be more compatible not only with the pressures that we're under in terms of all of this data, all of this matrix reporting and people that are involved in our work and productivity targets and less time for reflection, all of those things that are going on. Let's design learning that can fit into that system, but let's also equip leaders with the skills they need to be able to lead today. We are in the knowledge economy. We need leaders that are extremely adept and really have a good view of their own, it's really inside-out leadership. Understand yourself first, and then you can lead other people. And that does require more of a coaching-based approach than a direct delivery approach in my experience. And I think having coaching kind of booming the way it is and yet not delivering results that organizations are seeing, I really think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't get the individual in context. So if we can bring together those two ideas of coaching, but group, and then being able to see people and then be able to give them feedback in real time and help them, support them in an ongoing sustainable way to embed those new behaviors, practice them, continue to get feedback on them, it really allows the content to stick. So I'm going to just open it now to questions. So if you've got any questions, I haven't seen any kind of come into the chat, but if there's anything that you would like me to kind of go back to or go a little bit deeper on, happy to do that. I think if your phone's muted, you can feel free to unmute it. Are there any questions in the group?